All right, let's give these Northern Lights a try, shall we? Okay, so I've been really wanting to give Northern Lights a try because, aside from the fact that they're beautiful, it just looked like such a challenge with watercolors because I've done this with acrylic, and with acrylic, it's easier because you can just layer the colors on top of each other, but you can't do that with watercolor. So I'm going to give it a try, and in the end, I'm 90% happy with the way it came out, but I've figured out some improvements. But let's do this together, and let's see if you figured out some of the stuff I didn't, and maybe we can just do this together. So I taped up the edges. That's up to you, of course. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But right now what I'm doing is just using water to basically paint the Northern Lights, the light strips, if that makes sense, like the actual light part. And because we're going to start with the Northern Lights. And if you've done this in acrylic or oil, then that's usually the last thing you do. So we're flipping it with watercolor. And I'm basically just doing the water for the Northern Lights. And I'm not going off of a photo, so if you want to use a photo to kind of reference, especially if you see one that you really like, then go ahead and kind of mimic where the lights are. But I'm just kind of winging it, and I am adding a very bright yellow to the, and if you're, I don't know what watercolors you're using, so I'm just trying to use basic terminology, but if you are using the Dr. P.H. Martin, it's the Hansen Yellow Light, which is a very vivid yellow, if that makes sense. And it almost has like a glow to it. It's a very weird yellow. I never thought I would actually use it, but it's actually come into use quite a bit, like things like this. So I'm starting with the yellow, and then I'm going to frame it with a aqua-ish green, and again in the Dr. P.H. Martin, that's the phthalo green. It's a green, but it has that more of a, it does look like it has a little bit of a blue tint to it. So it's very much looks like the Northern Lights. And because this is really wet, they are blending together, which is exactly what we want. Because if you look at the Northern, I mean, they come in different colors, but I think this is probably the most common color. And so I'm doing it where it blends a little bit. The funny thing is when this actually dries, you can barely see these colors. So it looks so bright and vivid now, but it actually does, compared to the rest of the sky, it does kind of blend out. And then the Northern Lights have these, it almost looks like rays, light rays going through it. And I think this is one of those things, yeah, like, you know how, this is a digital image, but I used it because it was so pronounced. So this is one of the steps that I think I would change if I were to do this again. And I think I actually will try another one again and see how much better I can do this. But this is one of those things I probably would have changed. Right here I'm doing both sides. I'm making the light rays from top to bottom. In hindsight, I would probably just go from the bottom to the top. And I think that might look a little bit better because when you see, some of them do have top to bottom, but most of them seem to have, it looks like rays going, it almost has a flat bottom and then rays going up. So that's probably something I would change. So fun fact, it was many years before I knew that Northern Lights actually move. Because all I've ever seen was photos, so I never knew it moved. And then one day I just saw a video, I was like, oh my gosh, that's really pretty. It's pretty without moving, but once I figured out they move, I thought they were even prettier. And I've obviously never seen them in person. Have you seen them in person? I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and now I live in Phoenix, so I've obviously never lived anywhere near where there are Northern Lights. I've been to Alaska a few times, and Canada and Washington, but never around the time that there was Northern Lights. So hopefully one day I get to see them in person. It is definitely on my bucket list. So the key to this painting is a lot of water. The more water you use, the better it will blend. And right now, and see what I mean about that color fading? Like you could barely see the yellow and green now. So right now I'm doing the top section. I'm kind of doing it in sections because water dries, and I think it's just a little bit easier if you kind of tackle it in sections. So this top kind of V section is the area I'm working on next. You can go in whatever order you want, but I suggest doing it in small sections so that you can keep the paper really, really moist. Apologies if you hate that word. I can't not use that word in watercolor. And then I'm adding a blue. It doesn't matter what blue you use. Use a blue that you're comfortable with, because this is actually almost going to completely blend out. This is more of your color that's going to help you transition from that Northern Lights yellowish green into the night sky. And I'm putting the blue here because I don't want it to be Northern Lights and then bam, sky. You want it to blend a little bit. So I'm using the blue to help with the blending. And because I'm using a lot of water, it's going to actually pull a lot of those colors up, and you might be able to see a little bit where that's happening. It's actually right below my hand. You can see that the color is actually bleeding into the blue, which is great because those lines are so perfectly thin. There's no way I could have done that by hand. I mean, I might have been able to, but it's just nice because the water is doing it for me. And then I'm basically going to keep cleaning my brush, making sure there's no paint on it, drying it, and then using the brush to lift the color to help blend it. So every time you see me move my hand out of the way, I'm cleaning it. I'm taking paint off. So there's no paint on my brush right now. I'm using the colors that are on the paper to help blend, and then I'm using basically just the dry brush to help blend those colors together. If that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. So I'm just going to see, I don't know if you could tell. You should be able to tell that there's no color on my brush, and I'm using it to just blend. And then I'm adding more water here so that it can continue to blend. And then I'm going to add the darker, at this point, I'm going to be adding black. Or no, sorry, Payne's Gray. Which, if you don't have Payne's Gray in your paint box, it's a great addition. It's Payne's Gray, but it looks like it has a little bit more of a blue tint to it. A lot of people swear by Payne's Gray. If you take black and white, it makes this gray color, but it's an interesting gray. It's not like a true gray. It's hard to describe, but Payne's Gray is like a true bluish gray. So that's what I'm adding here. And then I'm going to be adding a combination of the black because night sky is black, and just going to keep blending. So the way to blend, again, a lot of water, and then you take the paint off your brush and keep it clean, and then use the paint that's on the paper to blend it together. Does that make sense? So no paint on the brush, and then if you want to blend it. Now I'm adding more layers, and then you're going to keep doing that. Keep adding more layers until you get to the color that you want, and then keep blending. Like I said, I'm tackling one section at a time, and now it's the black. So I don't know if you can tell that the Northern Lights are green. Can you see it just kind of beautifully spread into the blue? And I love that, but I think that was one of those things where I was like, oh, that's really cool. But then for some reason I did it on the bottom too, and then when I went back and looked, this is what happens when you don't use a photo as a reference. I went back and looked at pictures. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really do that on the bottom. So maybe don't do yours like that, and guess what? You'll have a better painting than I did with this tutorial. That's how good this tutorial is. Your painting will turn out better than mine. Hopefully. I actually love when that happens. So, and you know, I was thinking, you're probably thinking, why didn't you just figure this out first and do the tutorial so it makes more sense? Does that make more sense? Probably, but I don't do things that make sense, do I? That's why my tagline is, what is my tagline? It's something like, the not so serious watercolor artist. Oh my god, I don't even know what my own tagline is. If you go to YouTube, maybe you can tell me what it is. It's in my cover photo. Clearly do not take myself seriously here. So now I'm going to keep blending back and forth, and this is the blacks and the Payne's gray is where I'm blending now into the blue. And I think a part of me was like, oh, this is so pretty how it blended, and I didn't want to go over it. The hardest part is really just blending it enough without losing the color. And I would say the best way to do that is just really go light with the layers and keep adding. But I think you can start to see where it's coming together a little bit. This is one of those paintings where you really just have to keep painting, because at this point you're probably frustrated. You're like, what is happening? This does not look like Northern Lights. Just keep going. I completely felt the same way. And if you saw this picture in my thumbnail and you said, hey, I want to give that a try, then obviously you thought it looked good enough to want to give it a try. I didn't like it at this point. So this was just one of those things where you just have to keep going until you get to the end, because it's really when it starts to come together. The other thing I just did, which is right before I started painting here again, was I took a rag and kind of dabbed some of the color, which is a great way to lift color up too, especially if you add a little bit too dark or it blends too much. Then you can add some more color, or you could take it away with the cloth. So here, what am I doing? I don't know why I decided to shorten my Northern Light here. In the end, I wasn't really thrilled that I did this, but I have to work with it at this point. And see how I'm picking up color. It's because I really didn't want to lose that green that was in the middle. So if you get to the point where you also do the same thing, use your rag. This is why I also like using rags instead of paper towels, because sometimes paper towels leave behind like that lint. But also, if you're like me, you end up using it so much, you'll end up going through a roll of paper towels on one painting. I do use mine a lot. And then I wash my rags. So if you look at my rags, they look dirty. It's not. They're washed. It's just, it's paint. Eventually, it just does not come up. And these are water soluble. Watercolors come up for the most part. So if you spill a little bit on your clothes, you should be fine. But if you put enough paint on them like I do, then nothing's going to take it up. So here I am adding a little bit black again towards the middle because the night sky is coming through. And it's pretty much the same thing on all of it. So, I was taking it sections at a time. It's a lot of just layering and blending, lifting color up. It's one of those things you kind of just have to eye it as you go. Make sure to use a lot of water. The more water you use, the better it will blend. You could definitely use too little water. I don't think you can really use too much water. Like if you obviously dump a bucket of water on there, that might be too much. But it's definitely, God, I use that word so much. What can you say instead of definitely? It is, I don't know, what word can you use instead of definitely? I use definitely a lot. I know people just have words they use a lot. What's your word that you use a lot? Basically and definitely, I think, are mine. Which I didn't know until I started using these videos. I know a lot of people say and a lot, or So I did one of those speech classes where anytime you would say and or they would sound a buzzer, and it basically scares the shit out of you into not saying those words anymore. So maybe I should start doing that again with painting. So if you start hearing buzzing in the background, it's not what you think it is. So I'm adding black again. So here, this top right corner, at the moment, I did not know this was going to be my favorite part of my painting. But when it dried really cool looking. It really did look like actual northern lights in that top right corner. It looked like it was just that really soft light sitting on top of the night sky, and it came out so good. I really love the way that part came out, and I don't know how I did it. It's just like it came out so good. So I might have to rewind my own video and see what I did there. But see how it's spreading? Look how it's spreading up there. So I think in hindsight, next time I won't let it spread so much on the bottom. Maybe you guys like it. What do you think? Do you think it looks okay with it spreading and bleeding into the bottom too. I mean, I guess I've seen Northern Lights do that, but not so much. So how are you doing so far with this? Are you watching it, or are you painting along? This is definitely one where you don't have to actually watch it and paint along. It's more of a show a couple of things and you guys paint along, and if you get stuck, then maybe look up type of thing. So now, of course, wait for it to completely dry so you can add the stars. And as always, I'm using my bleed proof white and a very, very thin brush. I know a lot of people like to spread the paint with like a toothbrush and flicking it. I said it time and time again, that is not my favorite method of doing that. I just like to have a little bit more control, and honestly, I just think it looks a little bit better when you do the dots. And of course, I'm fast forwarding it through here because you don't really want to sit there and watch me paint dots all over the paper. And I'm painting it on the darker sides because the idea is that you won't be able to see it through the Northern Lights, right? Because they're lights and the stars are lights. So that's the other thing too. I think if you flicked it with a toothbrush, it would probably end up on the Northern Lights and not look real. So here I'm adding some trees, and this kind of seems to be my theme. Whenever I do a night sky, I add trees to the bottom. I just like the way it just completely finishes off the painting. And I do different types of trees. This time, I don't know what these trees are called, but these are the ones where there's more branch visible. I just thought it was pretty. And I'm not going to add too many. I'm adding maybe a couple of big ones on the right. And then I'm going to add a couple of little ones. And I just got a notification that the battery's dying on my computer. So hopefully it makes it the other 7 minutes. I think it will. Maybe it won't. You would never notice, because if it didn't, then I would just pick up where I left off. So there's really no point in even me telling you that my battery is dying. So trees are super easy, just a thin line, and then you just zigzaggy the brush for the branches. If you want to look at different trees, you can do, if you see your Christmas trees, there's different types of Christmas trees, right? So just do different types, whatever you're comfortable with. I think in the end, so I finished this up, I walked away from it, and then in the middle of the night I woke up. I was looking at it. It's like, you know what? It needs more color. And I went and added a little bit more yellow and green in the middle of the night. And I don't know why I did that, because I didn't film it. It was the middle of the night. It was just something I did. But yeah. But this is kind of what it ends up looking like. And then here I go. I'm going to add some of the smaller trees to the left of it. And I do end up, this is the funny part, so I do the trees, and I do my lines. Yep, and here it comes, crooked tree, and 3, 2, there it is, crooked tree. Maybe it's falling down. I do end up fixing it, so if you do end up with trees that are kind of not the angle you want, just watch how I fix this one. So I straighten it out a little bit, and just add more branches. Nobody's the wiser. Nobody would know. You can still kind of see it's crooked, but I think I do add more branches to it. So I'm going to keep adding the trees, and then I'm going to take my brush. So the tip of your brush, especially if you're using a smaller brush like I am here, it already has the shape of a tree. And this is, of course, paint on dry paper. So you want the paper to be completely dry, otherwise it's going to bleed. But if you notice that over here, the water kind of bled a little weird. So I'm using the trees to kind of cover that up. What does Bob Ross call that? Happy little mistakes. So that's what we did, a happy little mistake. And then I'm going to just turn that kind of into a hilly top with some branches. And I'm going to just keep going back and forth until I get to the point that I like. And that's pretty much it. I fill up the bottom. There you go. White, weird, water blotchy spot is now gone. I apologize. My phone should be not on silent. I just turned that off. So now I just turned a white water blotch into a hill. And then I'm going to add more trees, just because now it just looks like there was a fire and it's just the trunks. And I'm just going to do that by using my brush and turning it sideways. And see, look, a bunch of little trees. All you have to do is just, almost like a stamp, completely make your brush sideways, and it makes trees, little tiny trees. It's the wonders of art. I wonder if people ever look at this like, oh, look at all the hundreds of little trees she painted. It's not. Anyways, hope you guys are enjoying this process. I hope that your Northern Lights came out better than mine did. If you want to give it a try again, if you want me to do another one, let's see how we do together. Let me know in the comments. I'm totally open to this because I don't feel like I've mastered it quite yet, but I know what I did wrong. I think the next one will nail it. So I'm definitely going to try it again myself. But the question is, do you want to watch that and do that tutorial too? I'll be curious to see. If you figured anything out that I didn't figure out, then please let me know in the comments. Let me know how you feel about everything. I'm adding a couple more bigger trees here to the left. But that's pretty much it. And then I'm going to take off the tape. But go ahead and finish up your painting. I'm going to stop talking so that you guys can enjoy the end of the painting. Enjoy some of the relaxing music. And I'm going to remove the tape after these trees are done so that you can see what it looks like, and then show you the painting. But leave comments, let me know how you did. If there's any special requests, of course, let me know. And if you think that this helped you out at all, please do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. It helps get the word out, it helps me out, and keeps this channel going. Have a lovely, lovely day.